America is the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Our special weaponized empathy. We planned to do this special on empathy. And then, like 4 days later, Hillary Clinton, the former First Lady, the former Secretary of State, the almost first woman to become President of the United States, wrote this article in The Atlantic, MAGA's War on Empathy. The crisis in Minneapolis reveals a deep moral rot at the heart of Trump's movement. The article is about one of the guests that we already booked on the show. How about that? Way ahead of you, Hillary. Now, this article is great, and I can't wait to go talk to Joe about it. Hillary says, that the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy reveals a deeper moral rot at the heart of Trump's MAGA movement. Whatever you think about immigration policy, how can a person of conscience justify the lack of compassion and empathy for the victims of Minnesota and for the families torn apart or hiding in fear, for the children separated from their parents or afraid to go to school, said Hillary. Now, to be clear, Hillary and everyone on the elite left, these people, the Renee Goods, the Alex Preddys, they're all just cannon fodder. This is an actor, remember him, Gus from Breaking Bad.
If the whole world showed up on Putin's doorstep or on the Iranians' doorstep or in Washington, it would stop. They'll kill 550 million, however, but the rest of us would survive with a new. This is time for a revolution. It's time for it.
She got you. The rest of us would survive. Do you think Hillary Clinton would be on the front lines of the revolution that they want? Pretty sure Hillary Clinton would survive it. Just like no one was happier that January 6th happened than Nancy Pelosi. She was giddy from start to finish. Same thing here. It's the Hillary Clintons on the left who love that people died in Minneapolis. They wanted this to happen so that they could stop Trump from enforcing federal immigration law, which we've articulated many times before on this show, is an existential threat to them and their power. The hypocrisy, we've gone over this all before. I'll do it real quick. The idea that the left, for 1 second, thinks they have the moral high ground over any of this is ridiculous. 550,000 children, unaccompanied children, came unaccompanied, not just kids with families, unaccompanied children came across the border under Joe Biden. Children dropped off in the desert. Children trafficked across with sex traffickers. Then either they dropped off in the desert or came into America to then be sex trafficked even more and abused. How many children killed by illegal aliens? No tears from Hillary. To hear this, pretend that these people have the moral high ground from the people who keep our kids in failing schools and told little boys and girls that they could change their gender by chopping off body parts. The party of abortion is claiming the moral high ground. Don't let them claim it for 1 second. One observer in Minneapolis was arrested by ICE for interfering in operations, right? And it turns out the person that she saved, and the guy got away, the illegal alien got away. The person that she saved was a wife beater, an illegal alien wife beater. Been convicted of it. I would love for the ex-wife, I'm hoping ex-wife of that illegal alien, could meet with his savior, his white savior who saved him from being deported. Right? I would love for the abused wife to confront the white woman in Minneapolis and explain to the observer the abuse that this illegal alien put her through. And have this ex-wife say, why would you protect him? I've been wanting this guy deported for years so he would stop stalking me and stop abusing me. And you protected him? Why did you do that? You protected him. Why? Because you think you're compassionate? You have empathy? How about some empathy for me? How about some empathy for all the women he's abused? We have compassion, they think. Yeah, your so-called compassion is very misguided. It lacks discernment and wisdom. It may have all the feels, but it lacks discernment and wisdom. We talked a bit about this in our last week's special. Remember I shared the story of women who see everyone as either baby, protector, or enemy. We don't have time to go through it all again here today, but what we're seeing right here out of the left, particularly out of women on the left, is toxic empathy. We're going to define this empathy word throughout the show today, but Allie Beth Stuckey wrote a book called Toxic Empathy, who also was in this Hillary Clinton article in The Atlantic as well. Toxic empathy is love, any love that, if you're listening on the podcast, those big air quotes, any love that encourages you to affirm sin, validate lies, or support destructive policies. So empathy is any so-called love that encourages you to affirm sin, validate lies, or support destructive policies. These are bad things. Sin, lies, destructive policies are bad. So anything that encourages you to do that is not good. Toxic empathy. A clear example of this from Allie Beth is imagine a person whom you feel empathy to. In their pain, if they're feeling all these horrible things. And Allie Beth says we can empathize with the pain of withdrawal for a drug addict. We can empathize with that. That's empathy. But it would be cruel to give them the heroin they crave. That would be toxic empathy. See the difference? Men and women are different. That's what it all boils down to. We've lived in a culture that for the last 20 plus years or so has been run by progressive women, the worldview of progressive women. Now conservative men are taking it back, and it's jarring for many people. But men and women are different. I see it every day in my life as a parent. Just the other day, my 9-year-old was feeling sick. He was at school feeling sick, and the nurse called. And my wife was like, I'm coming, my poor baby's sick. And I said, whoa. Can you just lay down for a while and drink some water and see if he feels better? You can go back to class. Right? I mean, there's about 50 examples of that every day in our home. And kids need a mom and a dad for this reason. Men and women are complementary to each other. That's good. But when it comes to our country, it is the conservative men's turn now. By the way, sidebar, if only men could vote, Trump would have won every single state in America. Trump won nationally among men 55-43. But I'll end with this. Don't think that if women were all in charge, it's just rainbows and sunshine. This is Helen Andrews. Helen Andrews is the person leading the way on how feminism has hurt society and how wokeness happened. And wokeness happened because progressive women took over. And it's really important to know this. It's really important to know how this happened so we make sure it doesn't happen again, first of all, and also so we can understand that we have a very different worldview that's now in charge. Here's Helen Andrews.
But if you want to put it in a single sentence, you could say that feminization equals wokeness. Everything you think of as wokeness is simply an epiphenomenon of demographic feminization. Think about all the things that wokeness means. Valuing empathy over rationality, safety over risk, conformity and cohesion over competition and hierarchy. All of these things are privileging the feminine over the masculine. So if you have ever wondered why wokeness appeared out of nowhere when it did, that is my hypothesis, that all of the institutions that began admitting women in the 1970s eventually got enough women that they were able to reorient them. For example, women are consistently less supportive of free speech than men in surveys asking which is more important, protecting free speech or preserving an inclusive society. Approximately 2/3 of men say free speech, and approximately 2/3 of women say inclusive society. In moral reasoning, the traditional way of phrasing the difference between men and women is to say that women have an ethics of caring and men have an ethics of justice. In making a moral judgment, men will ask, what are the rules and what are the facts? Women tend to be more interested in context and relationships. So let's apply that to wokeness. When James Damore wrote his famous, or I should say notorious memo for Google, arguing that female underrepresentation in the hard sciences might not be the result of bias and prejudice, no one even attempted to argue that he was wrong on the facts. The reason that he was fired was because the things he had written might make his female coworkers feel bad. Or consider the Kavanaugh hearings. The masculine position was to say that maybe something bad happened to you, but if you do not have evidence, then we can't allow you to ruin a man's life and career over it. The feminine position was to say, how can you talk about rules of evidence? Can't you see she's crying? Now, to be clear, many women were revolted by the way the Kavanaugh hearings played out. In fact, the very best book on the Kavanaugh hearings was written by two women, Molly Hemingway and Carrie Severino. But a political system in which men predominate will tend to operate according to rules of facts and objectivity, and one in which women predominate will tend to operate by the rules of emotions and subjective facts, even if there are individual men and women who fall on the opposite side of those camps.
It's Helen Andrews. There was a study done just recently by FIRE, the free speech organization, and it was about how tolerant men and women are of free speech. And the conclusion was, ready for this? Men are more tolerant, and Helen spoke of tolerance for free speech. Men are more tolerant of people on the opposite end of the political spectrum than women are of people even in their own political party. You with that? Women, they're so against freedom of speech, not because they're against freedom of speech, but because they're for cohesion, right? They want people to be together and united, which is a wonderful instinct. But the problem with that is if anyone dare say anything that hurts feelings in any way, you're a threat to that cohesion, right? Women are wired, and this is so good, to bring people together, the tribe, the family. We want cohesion here, people. And people who say things that mess up that unity are a threat and need to be silenced. So women are wired. Men aren't wired like that. To the point where when the male worldview ruled society, society was more tolerant. As the female psyche has taken over more of our society, we're actually a less tolerant society. And that's where we see toxic empathy come in. We don't need more empathy, certainly not more toxic empathy. We need more compassion, but that has to be led with, as the Bible says, wisdom and discernment. How do we do that? Dr. Joe Rigney is going to be here. He's who Hillary wrote about in her Atlantic article. He wrote a book called The Sin of Empathy. And coming up next, we'll talk with an expert on feminism and how feminism tries to co-opt different principles and aspects of Christianity. They've been, unfortunately, far too successful. We'll break all that down, then we'll come back with some Jeremiah 12 to wrap up the show right here on the First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to our special Weaponized Empathy here on the First TV. Want to go right to Dr. Carrie Gress. She is the author of Something Wicked: Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. Dr. Gress, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Good to talk to you. Where did this book come from? What are you seeing out there in our culture that made you alarmed?
Yeah, well, I've been writing about this for about 10 years, but I think that we have finally gotten to this critical point where people are realizing that something has gone desperately wrong with women, and we're just not making women like we used to. It's very hard to understand what a good woman is in the culture anymore. And so, we have to start looking at feminism. I think we've made efforts on the right to try to make feminism something good and productive and fruitful. And yet, we keep running into these brick walls in terms of women and the direction of women, the anger, the aggression, all of these kinds of elements. And so, I finally started researching really deeply into feminism and recognizing that this is, the root of so many of our problems, that we really can't make it into something good or even make it work with Christianity at this point.
Where do you start with the story of feminism?
Yeah. Well, I think feminism goes all the way back to the 1790s, actually, with Mary Wollstonecraft. She's considered the grandmother of it. But the real story is that Mary Wollstonecraft was deeply against the idea of Christ and Christianity, and that was really spread throughout the first wave. We've been told the story that all the suffragettes were these very pious Christian women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, but if you look closely, they all followed Wollstonecraft in this idea of Unitarianism instead of Trinitarianism. So they didn't actually believe in the divinity of Christ. And they actually thought that Christianity was a tool used by men to enslave women. So they were trying to get rid of it. And it very much grew up with socialism and communism, and then actually became fused with communism in the 1900s. So it's got this remarkable, very colorful past that I think most people don't know. And I cover a lot of that in the book. But it's really fascinating, and I think most importantly, we need to see that the roots of it were not Christian, and it comes from a totally different kind of DNA than what we find in Christianity.
Very interesting. Did the Unitarianism come first? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Did that inform these women's feminism, you think?
Well, absolutely. I think that the Unitarianism started. Mary Wollstonecraft was actually very much pro-French Revolution. She was, actually can be argued the first female leftist thinker. And so that was really played a role, because she saw that any kind of male mediator was an obstacle to the potential of woman. And then after that, you see in the 1800s, all of these women, even if they started out as Baptist or Calvinist, they ended up becoming Unitarians and really throwing away the faith of their childhood and embracing this much more radical form that was really couched in the ideals of the Enlightenment and rationalism. So it comes from a totally different thread than Christianity.
Wow, what's the big? We can get a little theology here. Like, what is the fruit of the difference? So if you go down this Unitarian path, what's the fruit of that versus the fruit of the Trinitarian?
The Christian path. Yeah. So this is where it gets really interesting, because I think what we see feminism is it's an effort to be in control, and it's about power. Women were sold this idea that if we became more like men, we would be happier. But it's really about control. And one of the amazing things that I flesh out really in the book is this idea of the emotions, because in the 1890s, the socialists actually figured out that if you could make women mad, they were going to be a lot more politically active for you than if you have happy, healthy women. And so that's really the way in which feminism has been played out. And we can see this today, where women are being manipulated and told that it's better to be angry, contemptuous, or envious of others, instead of really living out those Christian virtues of faith, hope, and love. So we've taken those virtues of faith, hope, and love and just supplanted them in the culture with this feminine set of vices that is actually distorting and destroying women, I think.
Wow. Okay. All right. I'm doing my best feminism. But how can you have faith, hope, and love when you're being kept down in the house, unhappy by a man, and you can't reach your full potential out in the world?
Yes, isn't that a great question? Well, that's a fascinating thing, is if you actually go back and look at the narrative, certainly women have always been vulnerable, and there have been bad men, and there have been ways that women have been abused. But I think this whole story really revolves around this idea that the home was bad and that motherhood is bad. And so if you look at even the last 50 years, it's very hard to find people saying anything good about motherhood. And yet if you see the problems in the culture, so many of them are because women have rejected their role as mothers. They've rejected the incredible gifts that we give to society by mothering others. And, I think motherhood isn't limited just to biological children, but also to caring for others, whether it's spiritually or psychologically. These are really important gifts that we can bring to the workplace or wherever it is that our life takes us. And that's really what has been, we've been, it's been traded in, is this lie that if we just act more like men, then we're really going to be fulfilled and happier. And the problem is most women figure that out well into their 40s and 50s when it's too late, because they've already traded in the family that they might have had for this goal of being autonomous through a career and the prestige and income that's supposed to come from that.
There's many examples. One of the most obvious ones would be the writer of the Sex and the City books, who went down that road, and she's older now and miserable, and talks about what a great regret it was that she never had a family, and now she has no one to take care of her and help her. I mean, come on.
No, and that's the real tragedy. Yeah, when you're young, I mean, I know this is what I was sold, was this idea of getting your degree, getting a great career, and really focusing on yourself. This is kind of female autonomy. That's what we're sold as the highest good. And then from there, you can do whatever you want. But nobody tells us that, the body has its own, keeps its own score, and there really is a clock that's ticking biologically, and we have to pay attention to that. And ultimately, women report that those are the things that become most important to them: are rich relationships, are the family that they build, is the community that they're able to create. And because we've abandoned that, I think this is why we see so much incredible loneliness and unhappiness and depression, anxiety. All of these things can really be traced back to women buying deeply into the lie that they're going to be better off if they mimic men.
What's a subtle decision that you see young women making that you're like, oh wait, that's off. That's not going to
Yeah,
go down
well,
like the road.
I think it really is this prioritization of work. And, you can see why it's appealing, because when a woman is making decisions about her career, she's the one that's making those decisions. It's actually very hard to wait on a man to ask you out or ask you to marry him. There's this whole role of giving up your own control and your autonomy in that. And I think that's the real challenge. Is it's much easier to say, I'm in control of my life, and this is the direction in which I want it to go. And if I get married, great. And if I don't, well, we'll deal with that later. But I think it really is this prioritization of work. And oftentimes it does come at the expense of relationships and getting married. And, women are really being pushed in this way. I know a lot of women are being told, you can freeze your eggs when you're in graduate school, and then you can have kids later. Don't date. It's just going to distract you. And, this is a real tragedy, because these opportunities are not, we know from the data, they're not the same when you get into your 30s, 40s, and 50s, for sure.
What is your vision for your ideal Christian nationalist, anti-woman America, Dr. Grass? What do you want instead?
Oh, goodness. I want something very simple. I just want people to stop trying to think that feminism is actually good for women. I think that this feminism has shielded itself incredibly successfully from any kind of public scrutiny, because it says, as men, you're not supposed to question feminism, or, if you do question it, you must not be pro-woman. You don't care about women. In my case, I get, berated for questioning it because I have a PhD. And I think all of it is just an incredible disservice to women, and really keeps us from kind of looking behind the curtain and seeing, maybe these things are not working for women. So anyway, yeah, I think the answer is very simple. We just have to stop using feminism and considering ourselves as some kind of victimized by men, by default. I think these are very deeply Marxist categories that have really taken over the culture. And, the first step is really to stop using them, but also to start loving people closest to us, instead of this, I'm going to change the world by doing something great and on a grand scale. I think women really have this incredible potential to change the world starting with a local level. And then if the bigger stuff comes, that's great. But we have to learn to love those closest to us. And we're uniquely equipped to do that with our bodies and just the incredible gifts that God has given us.
Uniquely equipped indeed. About a minute left. Where have you seen this feminist ideas infiltrate the church?
Oh, yeah, I think it's all over the place. I think there's been this effort, a lot of ways in which the occult has entered in the church. And then there's just also this effort to try to make John Paul II's work on women something compatible with feminism, and even compatible with Mary Wollstonecraft, who was obviously not a deeply Christian woman, and certainly not a friend of Catholicism. So I think we need to see the red flags there. And again, moving away from the language is going to do a lot to clarify what it is that we mean by patriarchy, what it is that we mean by good men and good women, and ultimately is going to lead back to real flourishing of family and faith.
Please go get the book by Dr. Carrie Gress, Something Wicked: Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. Dr. Gress, thank you for your courage and for putting this all down on paper for us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Grateful for you. Well done. Let's come back with Dr. Joe Rigney, who was the feature target on Hillary Clinton's article the other day in The Atlantic. We'll talk with the guy, Joe Rigney, next, right here on the First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to the First TV, our special here, Weaponized Empathy. Let's go right to the man of the hour, Dr. Joe Rigney, author of the book, The Sin of Empathy, and also main target of Hillary Clinton's most recent article, MAGA's War on Empathy. Dr. Rigney, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm still alive, breathing. I do know how to swim. I'm in perfectly good health, and I have no suicidal thoughts whatsoever.
Just to be clear, everyone, how did you hear that she wrote an article about you?
I think so. I think I'd seen online. She mentions both me and Allie Beth Stuckey. Both of us have written books on this weaponized empathy idea, and so I saw the Allie Beth mention it, and I thought, oh, that's cool that Hillary went after her. And then I went and tracked down the article and realized, like, oh no, she called me an extremist pastor. It's Christmas, and so we got cupcakes and had a big party.
Oh, this is great. All right, can we roll through some of it? I underlined a bunch.
Yeah.
First paragraph. So she's talking about Alex Preddy and Renee Good in Minneapolis. Jesus tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves and to help those in need. Do this and you will live, he says, Jesus says, not in Donald Trump's America. What do you say to that?
Yeah. So this is what progressives want to do, is they have their own agenda, they have their vision, they have their totalitarian ideas, and they want to neutralize Christians from resisting it. And so they think if they just repeat Bible phrases filled with vacuous content and twisted, that Christians will back off. Well, I don't want to not love my neighbor, so I guess I just need to get out of the way. So right out of the gate, I read this and I think this is going to be a propaganda piece designed to mute and neutralize Christian resistance and moderate resistance to what the left is up to in the country right now.
What did Jesus say? Do this and you will live. Aren't we supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves?
We absolutely are, which is what the administration is doing. But they're actually loving their neighbors by trying to take violent, criminal, illegal aliens off the street and deport them back to the countries where they came from. Like this is what the left does with these kind of verses. Is love your neighbor means you're not allowed to have a border. You can't enforce immigration laws. That's what love your neighbor means. What actual love for neighbor means is love for neighbor. So if your neighbors are being swamped by massive illegal immigration or refugees being brought in and transforming towns like they happened in Ohio, then the loving thing to do is to say, this is bad, and we can, deport these people, which is what the administration is doing all around the country, in Florida and Texas and all these other red states, with no problems, no big protests, no big debacle. It's only in the places where the liberals have said, no, we're going to resist you, and we're going to baptize our resistance to enforcing immigration laws with love your neighbor.
Let me read a little more. Third paragraph. This crisis also reveals a deeper moral rot at the heart of Trump's MAGA movement. Whatever you think about immigration policy, how can a person of conscience justify the lack of compassion and empathy for the victims of Minnesota, for the families torn apart or hiding in fear, for the children separated from their parents or afraid to go to school? That compassion is weak, and cruelty is strong, has become an article of MAGA faith.
Right. So this is just a flat out lie. One, it is, I think, ironic that Hillary Clinton, of all people, is going to lecture us on what it means to be a virtuous, ethical, moral person and a good Christian. Like, she thinks that she has the credibility to make this sort of argument is laughable in the first place. But beyond that, like, nobody's arguing in favor of cruelty. Like, I think it's tragic what happened to Alex Preddy and Renee Good. I think it's they're dead. That's really, really sad. They met God, and I doubt that went well for them, honestly. So it's a great tragedy. But whose responsibility is it? In this case, you don't see, I mean, even at a basic level, are there a lot of conservatives just celebrating the death of these people like the left celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk? No, what you see is the conservatives who are speaking up are saying, this is why it's important for local law enforcement to cooperate with immigration agents in order to remove violent criminals. Otherwise, as opposed to what the left is doing in Minnesota, which is encouraging Antifa-like insurgency to harass law enforcement and disrupt their operations. And so these are great tragedies. We're not rejoicing in the cruelty, but we are recognizing that the left does not want, like when she says, whatever you think about immigration policy, It's like, actually, it matters in this point what you think about immigration policy. The fundamental question is, are we allowed to have a border or not? In her mind, we're not allowed to have a border. If the governor of Minnesota decides we are not enforcing those laws, the rest of the country simply has to submit to that kind of nullification of our border, and just have to, well, I guess we can't enforce them anymore. And we have to do so in the name of compassion, in the name of empathy. And what the administration thus far said, we're not going to subject ourselves to that kind of manipulation.
Great. On her Christian faith, toxic empathy. What an oxymoron. I don't know if that phrase reflects moral blindness or moral bankruptcy, but either way, it's appalling. This is certainly not what I was taught in Sunday school, not what my reading of the Bible teaches me, and not what I believe Jesus preached in his short time on earth. Yes, I went to Sunday school. In fact, my mother taught Sunday school at our Methodist church in Illinois. As an adult, I occasionally taught at our church in Little Rock, Arkansas. I've never been one to wear my faith on my sleeve, but that doesn't mean it's not important to me. Quite the opposite. My faith has sustained me, informed me, saved me, chided me, and challenged me. I don't know who I would be or where I would be without it. I believe that Christians like me have a responsibility to stand up to extremists who stand up to extremists who use religion to divide our society and undermine our democracy. What do you say when people say Christians like me? I saw the same thing with Don Lemon in the church, right? Of your friend.
Yes.
You helped plant that church. He said, oh, well, that's not the Christianity I practice. Or, I'm a Christian too. What do you say to people who claim they're Christians like this?
Yeah, so, I mean, there are, quote unquote, I'll say Christians like Hillary, like Don Lemon. They go to the rainbow churches, the churches that fly the rainbow flag and that elevate the rainbow flag over the cross of Christ, and in doing so, defame and blaspheme the cross of Christ. It's a selective appropriation of the Bible. They're the ones who are going to pick and choose the verses. So, thou shalt not murder. We'll find a way around that. The baby's in the, So this is what's laughable about it is, on the one hand, she's going to say things like, we need to be good neighbors, no matter who you are or where you're from. And it's like, just put a little asterisk by that and say, unless you live in a womb somewhere, in which case you can be slaughtered at will if a mother wants to be done with you. That's the sort of Christian like her that Hillary is. And there's a reason that those churches, those mainline Christian denominations that fly the rainbow flag, that have lady pastors, there's a reason why they are overwhelmingly dying. Because they're basically progressives wearing Christianity as a skin suit. And if you're a progressive, you're going, why would I get up early on Sunday morning to go hear all the same things that I hear all the other times? I'll just go to brunch instead. I'll sleep in and have a nice Sunday brunch. And so those churches, there's no kids because they've aborted them. They're not growing. They don't evangelize. They don't preach the good news of Jesus. They're just progressive social clubs. And so they're dying. They're going away. But she's trying to salvage it. And her main target, I think, is not Christians like her. It's Christians like her trying to manipulate Christians like us. They think if we can appeal to the soft-heartedness of Christians, who Jesus did say, be compassionate, be kind, be tenderhearted, if we can manipulate them, then there's no obstacle to our agenda.
Yes, she even speaks to this. She says the National Council of Churches expects that as many as 100,000 churches across the country will close in the coming years, mostly mainstream Methodist, Presbyterian, and Lutheran congregations. So, I mean, she speaks to the rainbow churches you just talked about, but doesn't see that she's a part of it and like the reason why.
Yeah.
All right, so she talks about, go ahead.
The cause is the abandonment of biblical truth, the abandonment of biblical orthodoxy. They don't pray to God our Father. They pray to God our Mother and other nonsense like that. They've abandoned the faith, and therefore God has abandoned them and taken away the lampstand so that the Spirit's departed. These are dead churches. They're not going to last, and it's a dead end. And so to try to buttress it and hold it up as a model of what the thriving churches in this country, churches like my denomination, which is growing, we can't find enough pastors to fill the pulpits in the denomination I'm a part of. Like, I have so many churches or so many groups of Christians who are saying, we would love to have a church that preaches the Bible like you guys do and that has a backbone and is courage and applies it. We want a church like that in our area too. And it's like, I don't have enough guys to send to those places. And I have to say, sorry, I'm working on it. I've started a seminary so that we can train more ministers, and I would love to send you one, but you got to give me a minute. And so our churches are growing, our churches are thriving. Meanwhile, hers are dying, but she doesn't see the connection to the abandonment and the manipulation of the Bible that is the cause of that decline.
Or does, and wants you to do the same.
That's right.
She quotes the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, Marianne Boudet. And we remember President Trump going to this service or whatever. And she said, "In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people of our country who are scared now." How is that weaponized empathy?
Well, for one, it's selective. So, when Hillary says the kids that are scared to go to school are afraid, what are they afraid of? Well, they're afraid that immigration agents are going to, if they're here illegally, are going to deport their parents or something like that. Like, that's the fear. And at one level, like, that's a reasonable fear. If they're here illegally, that's on the table, and they ought to, like, lawbreakers ought to fear law enforcement. That's not a problem. And at one level, as a Christian, as a human being, like, I can feel compassion for kids who are worried about the disruption. But it's like that still the law has to be enforced. The interesting thing is how selective it is. Hillary's worried about the fear of those kids. What about the kids in my friend's church? What about them? They had people, they were just trying to worship God on the Lord's Day. They had 50 people bust into their church and scream in their faces and call their parents Nazis and try to intimidate them. Those kids are afraid to go to church. Does Hillary have any compassion or empathy for them? Absolutely not, because this is why empathy is dangerous if it's leading the way. It's highly selective. We feel empathy for those on our team, and therefore we feel outrage and hatred for those on the other team, and we can justify and rationalize it accordingly, as Don Lemon did, as others who are justifying these as just protests in a church building. And so it's highly selective. What about empathy for Laken Riley's family, who their daughter was killed when she was out for a jog by an illegal immigrant who had been detained and released by the Biden administration? And there's hundreds and thousands of people, families like that, who have been torn apart, not by lawful deportation orders, but who have been torn apart because the Biden administration and the Obama administration and the Democrats before that have simply said, we don't have a border. We're not going to enforce the border. We're just going to let people in, and we're going to, if they get arrested, we'll re-release them. Or the Democrats in cities that arrest people and then re-release violent criminals into the community to commit more crimes, like in the name of empathy. So empathy in this context is a cover for all kinds of lawlessness and chaos that the left has unleashed, and they're trying to get Christians to go along with it and stop resisting.
She says, she's talking about Allie Beth. In between lifestyle pitter-patter and her demonization of IVF treatments, she warns women not to listen to their soft hearts. You talked about leading with empathy and soft hearts. What is the proper role of a soft heart, or empathy, if you will, versus how it's being manipulated?
Both Allie Beth's book and my book are not opposed to true compassion. In fact, we're defending true compassion against its corruption and counterfeit.
That's right.
And the difference is, what's the difference? The difference is empathy untethered from what is true and good, or is it anchored to what is true and good and governed by what is true and what's good? And so if compassion is governed by God's law, if it's governed by biblical truth, if it's governed by reality, then compassion is a great and glorious thing. It's one of the best things. It is what leads us to lean in when someone's suffering and hurting, and to weep with those who weep, and to be kind and try to relieve their suffering. That's all absolutely necessary as a Christian. But there's this other thing where it gets used the wrong way around as a kind of emotional blackmail. And for most people, if you're new to this discussion, the simplest way to get it is if you've ever been on the receiving end of a pity party, where someone that you care about basically puts on a long face, exaggerates their pain in order to get you to do something that you don't want to do. Well, if you give in to that, if you think, oh, this is bad for them, I shouldn't give in, but they look so sad and so pitiful, and you give in, well, that's the sin of empathy. You've just enabled them. You've coddled them to do destructive and harmful behavior to themselves or others, and you've done so in the name of compassion. And what I'm saying is, don't do it. Like, instead, let what is good, let what is true be the guide, and then let your emotions follow. And I think the left wants to turn that around, and they know that Christians, because we want to be known as compassionate people, are susceptible to manipulation on this front.
Great. What do you think the proper role is of a pastor or a church to be involved in politics and political issues? Yeah.
At a base level, the most important political thing that I do every week, I'm a pastor, the most important political thing I do every week is worship God with his people. And I say that because the biblical vision of how cultures are changed and transformed is it begins with worship. We go to the Lord, on the Lord's Day, we go into God's presence, we worship him in the name of Jesus, And we say, Lord, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And what we're saying is, God, we're trying to honor you here in this room and lift up your name and trust in you, in hope that you will then honor your name out in the culture, in the world, in politics, in society. But we believe that honoring God on the Lord's Day is the fuel that leads him to honor his name out and to bless our efforts and to make us fruitful in the world. And so as a pastor, that's the first and fundamental thing I want to do. And then out of that, I want to strengthen spines. Like the Bible says, strengthen weak hands and feeble knees. People go wobbly in the face of opposition. And I want to say, no, don't go wobbly, right? Now's the time for courage. Now's the time for clarity. Now's the time for real compassion for your neighbors who have had their country overrun by mass invasion enabled by the left. Like now is the time for courage and compassion for those neighbors. Don't flinch when the left threatens.
How's your friend doing at that church in Minneapolis that got attacked?
I think he's doing great. I think I've seen him a few times online. He's posted some clips from his sermons where he's just celebrating that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So I think that I know what he wants to say to everybody in light of the larger platform that God gave him through this moment is just Jesus is the way. There's a way to be made right with God. That's what he's going to prioritize. And so I think he's doing well, and I'm hopeful that the church is going to continue to stand for the truth and weather this particular storm.
Great. Dr. Joe Rigney, go buy the book. What more? What better? Are you guys going to reprint it with Hillary's endorsement on the front?
I know.
Not even the back, on the front.
I know. I want to get Hillary Clinton says, extremist pastor Joe Rigney. Hillary's favorite pastor. I want that on there because I think that'll actually sell a few copies.
Absolutely. The sin of empathy. If there's any confirmation that Dr. Joe Rigney and Allie Beth and you listening right now are over the target and on the right path, this is a pretty good sign of it. The sin of empathy. Go buy the book immediately and read it. Dr. Rigney, great to talk to you. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
We'll wrap up with Jeremiah 12 when we get back right here on the First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to Politics by Faith, our episode here, Weaponized Empathy. Let's end with Jeremiah 12. You may have heard the opening before. Righteous are you, O Lord, when I plead with you. Yet, let me talk with you about your judgments. So great. God, you're awesome and righteous, but I got some questions. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why are those happy who deal so treacherously? A great way to start off before you question God is to make sure you note that God is righteous and good. So well done there, Jeremiah. Now God answers in verse 5. He says, if you have run with the footmen and they have wearied you, then how can you contend with horses? And if in the land of peace in which you trusted, they wearied you, then how will you do in the floodplain of the Jordan? For even your brothers, the house of your father, even they have dealt treacherously with you. Yet they have called a multitude after you. Or yes, they've called a multitude after you. Do not believe them, even though they speak smooth words to you. Okay, so what's going on here? God is telling Jeremiah that if the present challenges you are facing are, well, two things. First, the challenges you're facing are preparing you for even greater challenges to come. Also, if you're being taken out now, just wait, because we got bigger ones coming. If you think running with ordinary men on feet is tiring, what are you going to do when the cavalry comes your way? If small challenges overwhelm you, what are you going to do when much greater challenges come your way? If this land of peace has wearied you, man, it's only going to get harder. The floodplains of the Jordan, that's like a jungle with lions. What is these lions and animals that want to kill you? If you're scared where you are now, yikes. It's about to get way harder, man. It says, you see, God's saying if you are complaining about the simple things that God have asked you to do, then, oh man, you lack the spiritual strength to do what I have next for you. You fear man now? Whoa, it's about to get way worse. And I love this line here. God says, do not believe them, even though they speak smooth words to you. And this is why I wanted to throw it here at the end of our show on weaponized empathy. People speaking smooth words. Well, who's the they speaking smooth words? It would be people even in your family who hate you and they call people against you. But that, I mean, there's open hostility and hatred, but that is nothing compared to the people who speak smooth words to you, right? So see the parallel. So the parallel is always, it's like land of peace, but whoa, man, you're about to go, land at the footplains of Jordan where there's lions are going to kill you. All right, you're tired running on after footmen. What happens when the cavalry comes? You think it's bad when people, and similarly, you think it's bad when people speak badly to you? Wow, it's way worse when people speak smooth words to you. Jeremiah 8:11 talks about all the false prophets who are saying peace, peace. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. That, by the way, that line quoted by Patrick Henry in his Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech. Patrick Henry said, gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. Weaponized empathy is a tool from the devil. Democrats say they want peace, peace. They actually want chaos. But these smooth words of peace and compassion and love and empathy and caring for people, these smooth words trickle down to people who are afraid and gullible. And when people are afraid, they look to the government for safety, pagans especially. But here's Jeremiah saying, oh man, it's going to get a lot harder. You better get in line with me, and you better get in line with the Holy Spirit now. No one else and nothing else will save you. Don't listen to the smooth flatterers. This came up on our special last week. Kisses of the enemy are deceitful. But that's not our job. We don't listen to the smooth flatterers. Our job is to listen to the Holy Spirit. Don't be swayed by the enemy. Either the enemy that's openly hating you or subtly manipulating you. And don't be swayed by your own emotions. Proverbs 16:32 says, he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. If you are slow to anger and if you rule your spirit, your emotions, controlling your emotions, you are mighty and you're stronger than someone who can even take a city. Control your emotions. Don't let your emotions control you. Instead, let the Holy Spirit control you. That is the only compassionate way forward. I have a podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts called Politics by Faith. We take the news of the day, run it through a biblical filter. There's a lot in the Bible. There's a lot going on, a lot of anxiety, a lot of craziness, right? But it's all in the Bible. Nothing new under the sun. It's all been done before. All the principles are right there. So we take the news of the day, run it through the Bible. I think you'll like it. Politics by Faith is our podcast. You can check it out anywhere you listen to podcasts. Spread the word.